Hey there, gang. I've got something a little out of the ordinary here for me today. This is a Cole Clark guitar, the Australian makers. It's a pretty early one too. This is a 2006. It's an FL1A-C, so it's a Fat Lady 1A with a cutaway. Cole Clark was part of that cohort of youngish manufacturers that showed up in the early 2000s, really kind of pushing the envelope in terms of CNC technology and how it could be incorporated into the building process. There were a number of them. Garrison Guitars here in Canada comes to mind. Most of them didn't make it through the decade. After the 9/11 slump and then the recession, it killed off most of them. Cole Clark's still around though. They're doing good for themselves. The company philosophies always revolved around using locally sourced sustainable woods. And being Australian, those are quite a bit different from the stuff we normally see around here. The top on this is Bunya pine, which does not look like any pine I've worked with before. It's a beautiful golden color, and it's got these streaks of bluish gray that run through it. They remind me of the kind of mineral or fungal inclusions you get in domestic spruce. If you don't process it quick enough, it'll get this blue stain. I think it complements the golden color really nicely, though, in this case. So the back and sides on this are something they call Queensland maple, which is, if you're getting into Australian wood terminology there, that's a sticky business. I think a lot of it has to do with early settlers not really knowing what they were dealing with and just trying to hang a name on something. Like the conversation's probably, "Hey Husey, what's that stack of timber over there?" It's maple." "You sure?" Yeah, maple." "All right, if you say so." Because they seem to have a lot of oaks and maples that bear very little resemblance to those species in other parts of the world. This to me looks a little more like Philippine mahogany, like sapele. It's pretty light in color, open grain, slightly semi-coarse texture, very resonant. It's good stuff. Doesn't look like maple though. In terms of dimensions, the top seems a little thicker than I would normally use on a spruce guitar, more in line with what I would put on a western red cedar instrument. The bridge and the fingerboard, although I might be mistaken, that looks like good old Indian rosewood to me. A big part of their manufacturing process involves using that Z-axis on their CNC router. They'll start with slightly oversized plates, and they will route them down to final thickness, as well as excavating little troughs for each of their braces to sit in as a positioning device. You can see there are remnants of the tool path running up and down the back there. They don't take any pains to hide that. The other thing they do is they go around the perimeter on the inside of both the top and back and make a little relief cut to promote flexibility at that point. Where the top is starting to get stiffer as it reaches the sides, they loosen it up and hopefully get a little more excursion of the top and back to pump a little more air. This idea extends to their bracing design as well. They actually use a combination of solid standard bracing, especially for the X-brace, that you would find in any guitar. But some of the other ones, the tone bars and finger braces, they will actually make out of the top itself. They will, in other words, they'll take that thick top and route out around those braces, leaving them integral with the top. I remember the first time I saw a picture of that, I thought, I don't know, do I trust that? Not sure. Because around here, for instance, we really do rely on the cross-grain stiffening effect of having those braces run across the grain lines. Maybe it's a function of the wood that they're using. I was thinking, for instance, like if you had a crack that started down here in the lower bout, there would be nothing to stop it from running all the way until it reached the bridge, for instance. It could be that they're manufacturing in a much drier climate, too. They just don't have the shrinkage problems that we do in North America. But for whatever reason, it seems to be working pretty well for them. And this guitar, we're okay, except for one little spot here in the lower bout, which we have to take care of. Just having a look at the way the neck shaft transitions into the headstock here, that was accomplished in a pretty nice way. You've got sort of a lock miter joint here that runs up and into this bird's mouth dart-shaped volute like you'd find on early Martins. Classy. I remember, this would have been around the same time that Taylor was first coming out with their finger-jointed neck design. And, there was a bit of an outcry. I remember you could order a VHS cassette tape of Bob Taylor telling you why they were doing it, why it was stronger and everything. But those ones, they looked a lot more industrial. It seemed like something you would find on furniture, and it was kind of disconcerting the first time you picked up a guitar with that headstock on it. This seems like a more elegant solution. Having a look on the inside, this isn't an X-brace. This is more of an A-style arrangement. And it looks like they've tried to stiffen up the treble side. They've got two braces there. They're quite a bit taller and heavier in section than on the bass side. The bass has got one long low brace there that's been pared down slightly. and one that is very flat. It seems to have carbon fiber stuck on the top of it that runs all the way from basically the tail block and up and into the upper bout. It's also got a portion of a pickup element that's actually stuck onto it there. The entire surface of the underside of the top has this wavy, undulating appearance to it from the router bit. It's left quite, wavy is probably the best term. So here's the reason it's in today. There's just one little crack that runs from the edge of the body up into the lower bout on the base side. It's about 2.5 inches long, 65 millimeters. It's very tight and quite level. I've been asked if I can put some glue in there to try to keep it from running any further, and maybe some cleats on the inside. I can easily do the glue. I'm not so sure about the cleats now. I put my hand in there and felt the undulating surface. Might be hard to get them to sit flat, but we'll do what we can. Using some slightly thinned tight bond glue here. I'll get a lake of it on the surface. And use my little suction cup here. Pump that through to the other side. This is one of the rare instances where even the deepest of my deep reach clamps won't reach. So for added insurance, I've got a little acrylic caul here. To be honest, this probably isn't even necessary. This is so tight and so level that it's not probably going to do very much, but just for added insurance, some gentle pressure from a cam clamp on the top here just to hold it down. Not a lot. I wouldn't want to bow the soundboard in and deform it while I'm gluing it. It's just holding things right where they are. Get that into place, like that. If it was open, I might put a secondary clamp across the soundboard and draw it in, but this is so tight, that's not necessary. Okay, that glued up really nicely. I've been asked to put a cleat in there, as I said, and I think that undulating interior surface is really going to be a bit of a hassle. I can't reach it by hand, and I need to sand sort of a flat spot on there. I think I'll use magnets for that. This is some 100 grit adhesive backed paper. Stick it onto one of the magnets. Trim it roughly to fit. Rather than rub directly on the surface of the guitar, I'm just going to make a little runway here out of green painter's tape, center it over the crack. Give me something to move against. I had a look inside with the mirror just to make sure we weren't going to bump up against a brace or anything, and we seem to be right in the clear. Hear how it's skipping? It's bumping from one of those little undulations to the next. So I'm going to spend some time doing this, knocking off the tops, and gradually we'll get it flat. Okay, having sanded that, I want to clean it off. This is a little paper towel soaked in naphtha. Get rid of some of that sanding dust. Cut myself a tiny little piece of double stick tape here, which I will use to hold that on the surface of the magnet while I grab it with some hemostats and get it down to where I need it to be inside there. Okay, so this crack is tight, it's been glued up, it's been cleated, and it's all set. Now you can still see there's a little hairline here in the finish though, and we might be able to improve that with a bit of a super glue drop fill. This isn't strictly necessary. This is purely cosmetic. This thing is not going to open up again, just maybe to improve the appearance. And it's actually it's not very noticeable unless you get up close to it. You can see I've got the green painter's tape here to protect the surface around it. I don't get it too close because I discovered that this super glue can wick in underneath it, and it reacts with the adhesive that's on the tape, the sticky stuff, and turns it really hard, and it becomes very difficult to get that off again. You have to basically sand it off. So I try not to get it on there, but this is just to prevent any little micro splatter or anything from going in places I don't want it to go. And I've got super glue here with the whip tip applicator. And I'm just going to build up a little line of it right over top of the crack. I'm not going to use accelerator on this because that can sometimes cause it to turn white. We'll just let it dry by itself. Although this stuff flashes off in a few seconds, I like to let it cure for about 15 minutes or so before I go back and work on it again. This thing is so shallow that it might only just take the one application. This is a fresh single edge razor blade, and I've got a piece of plastic tape, Scotch tape here. It's going to cover a portion of the blade, leaving the center section uncovered. And the tape actually acts as a depth stop. It's about 0.02 of an inch thick, like very, very thin. I remember the first time I saw this trick probably would have been early 2000s on Frank Ford's website, frets.com. And it just sort of blew my mind because it was such an elegant solution. What a delightful noise. This is some 600 grit sandpaper, wet or dry, glued to a flat block. This might actually polish the surface up higher than the surrounding, because this is a satin finish. We might have to go back and scuff this back down and make it look more like the rest of the top. But this will help get us really good and flat. Yeah. This is a gray Scotch Brite pad, which will just sort of unify the whole thing. It looks and feels pretty good. I'm happy with that. So we're all set to go. What do I think of it? I like it. It's a nice big guitar, nice open sound, good for chords. It's well made.